This is Join Us in France, episode 386, 386. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France. Everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel to France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Jennifer Gruenke about 7 day trips she took from Paris. She did all of this in 1 week. And we talked about it soon after it happened, so it was all fresh in her mind. Plus, she's been living in Paris for just a few months, so she knew what to look out for. I met Jennifer last time I was in Paris, and we hit it off, as you can imagine. She's also one of the Facebook group moderators, and I have to say that they do such a wonderful job in the group, so thank you for that as well. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my very popular itinerary consult and also my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the Voice Map app. And you can browse all of that at joinusinfrance.com/boutique. I am working on a newsletter about the Tour de France. Bicycling. If you're not signed up, go to joinusinfrance.com/newsletter and do it. My newsletters are not very frequent, but they are usually full of helpful information for anybody who loves France. Bonjour, Jennifer Gruenke, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie.
I am excited today to talk to you about 7 day trips that you took from Paris. Now, not a lot of people get to do this, but the great advantage is that since you did them all in 7 days, right?
Yes, 7 consecutive days.
Right. So it was all fresh in your mind, and you can compare and contrast and tell us what your favorites were. So let's name the 7 that you did. You went to Rambouillet. You went to Auvers-sur-Oise. Fontainebleau.
Yeah.
Saint-Cloud. Saint-Germain-en-Laye. And Provins.
Yes.
And Versailles. Okay.
Yes.
So there are a lot of people who want to take day trips from Paris, and they're not sure how to do it or which one is best and all of that. So we want to hear all about it. The floor is yours, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. So the setup is I live in Paris. One of the reasons I wanted to live in Paris is because it's a great launching point from which to see other places in France and even, outside of France. I moved to France in January, and we got to a point in March, late March. I guess this was last week. I woke up Monday morning and I checked the weather forecast, and every single day was going to be gorgeous. Highs in the upper 60s Fahrenheit and sunny, no rain. And this was my sort of first really good week of not having to wear my big heavy coat outside kind of weather. And so I hatched a plan to buy a week's Navigo Pass. This is a pass where you can pay 22.80 euros, I believe, and you can ride on the trains that do not require a reservation, like a seat reservation, anywhere in the Île-de-France region during that week. And so I was going to get my money's worth out of this pass and go on 1 day trip every single day. And basically the only rule was I have to leave Paris and go someplace outside of Paris that I can get to on this pass.
Wonderful. That sounds like a great challenge.
It was a great challenge. It turned out I didn't save as much money as I thought I was going to save, because starting March 1st, the train system lowered the prices for a lot of these places for single trips. I did save I paid about half of what I would have paid if I had done them as single trips. But if there's somebody out there that wants to do any of these day trips, the tickets are now capped at €5 each way.
Wow.
So these would be, cheap and easy day trips for anybody to do, even if you just want to do one of them instead of all 7.
Definitely. Good to know.
Okay, so Monday I went to Rambouillet. Is that right?
Rambouillet.
Rambouillet.
There you go. There you go. That's the spirit.
Get my French R's. Okay, there's a chateau here that is historically important. It was originally a medieval fortress. It was used by Louis XVI. He pretty much was all over the place, I've discovered in this week. Napoleon I also used this chateau. Then more recently, it was used as a summer home by the French presidents up until 2009. So it's kind of a French Camp David. The first meeting of the G6 was held at this chateau, and they have the dining room set up as if it were ready for all the dignitaries from these 6 different countries. And you can see the menu for what they ate.
Okay.
The chateau has been kept looking mostly medieval, much more so than some of the others I saw later on that had been sort of renovated during the Renaissance. But this one really does look like a medieval castle. You can see, though, Napoleon upgraded a room and put in a bathtub. So you can see Napoleon's bathtub if you are so inclined. They also have 2 smaller outbuildings that you get on the one ticket. And the first one you come to is the Laiterie de la Reine, the Queen's Dairy. So apparently Marie Antoinette she was brought to this chateau by Louis XVI, and she did not like the medieval chateau. She called it La Gothique Crapaudière, the Gothic toad house.
Okay.
And so Louis XVI built her a more Renaissance style stone building. It's the same kind of idea as the Trianon at Versailles, which was built first. It's her play farm. But they do have some animals there. I walked up and there was this very large tom turkey that gobbled at me as I walked up to the building. So
is it like the Trianon or is it like the Hameau de la Reine?
I have not been to the latter, so I don't know.
Okay.
It's a stone building.
Okay.
It's kind of, the stone building was used both for tastings of things like cheeses, I guess, and they've got like carvings of the process of how to process dairy. So there's, a pastoral image on the wall in relief of, a shepherd milking the sheep or whatever.
Okay. So I'm sure you'll send me some photos of all these beautiful places.
Yes, I can send you as many photos as you would like.
Okay. But it's still Gothique Crapaudière.
Yeah.
And you can tell French was not her first language because a French person would have said La Crapaudière Gothique. We would have done it in the other direction.
Really?
So, yes.
That I did not know.
Yes.
The second outbuilding they have is La Chaumière au Coquillage, which is the Seashell Cottage. I had no idea what to expect, but you walk out there and first thing you see is this cottage, and it has very large bones sticking out of the outside.
Bones?
Like the femur of a cow or something.
Oh. Okay.
I read online that it's for drainage. It helps the water drain out from inside of the building.
I see.
But it's the first thing you see when you walk up. And then you go inside the building, which is a very small cottage, and you see this room that is covered with seashells.
Okay.
like it's wallpapered with seashells. It's very dramatic looking.
Yeah.
It's pretty, but at the same time, you wouldn't want to like lean against the wall because the walls are very three-dimensional.
I know a lot of people who collect seashells. They never know what to do with all these seashells.
This could give them some ideas.
Yes. She didn't know what to do with all the seashells. She stuck them on the wall. Why not?
Yes, apparently the cottage was built for a woman. It wasn't Marie Antoinette, but it was somebody else associated with somebody that owned the chateau at some point. But you get to see those three things. There also are extensive grounds where you can walk around, and it's very beautiful. There are a lot of people from the nearby town that just, you can walk outside for free. You don't have to pay to get into the gardens.
That's usually the case for French chateaux. Very often locals can get in. Well, anybody can get in the gardens for free. They check your ticket to enter the chateau, but not to enter the garden.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one exception I found is Versailles when the fountains are on.
That's right. When fountain days or musical fountain days, you have to pay to enter the gardens. But otherwise...
But you can pay a lower fee and just see the gardens and not the chateau if you want to.
Right. I think it's $9.90 to just enter when the gardens are on, which is quite a bit these days. Like all through the spring and summer, the waterworks and the fountains are going to be on like every Tuesday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, it's several times a week. So, yeah. And they charge you all day because even though they only turn on the water at certain times, because they figure you can stay in the garden all day, so they just charge you.
Yes. This Chateau Rambouillet was not nearly as expensive. And they actually gave me a discount for having the week pass on my Navigo card.
Oh, cool.
Which is something that's fairly new. I think they announced this last year, that many of the museums and cultural sites around France are now giving a discount if you have this train pass.
Well, they gave it to me like the bateau bus. I only had a Navigo Easy, but they still gave me the discount.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I have the Navigo Découverte. And they technically weren't supposed to give me the discount, but they did anyway.
Yeah, that's French people because we like to stick it to the man.
Oh, goodness. I did, when I was wandering around the gardens, have a nice conversation with a French lady who did not speak English. So I was very proud of myself for managing to carry on a conversation in my limited French. But she was very patient and spoke very slowly.
Good.
And she told me that her son had moved to America, so her grandkids did not speak any English or any French. They only spoke English. And so I suspect that she's had practice speaking with her grandkids.
Yeah.
But it was nice to talk to her. And once you get out of Paris, that's something that you find is that there are people who will speak French slowly, and because they don't speak any English, they won't switch to English. Because usually when Americans are coming here, our French is not as good as other people's English when we're in Paris.
Yeah, that can happen. They even tried to speak English with me. I set them straight right away.
I'm sure you do.
All right. So Rambouillet. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy Rambouillet? Did you buy food on the premises? Did you use any, did you use do they have a little tourist train or bike rentals or anything like that?
I did not do any of that.
Okay.
I think I'm kind of getting mixed up as to what food I got where.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Because I didn't write that down.
If it doesn't stand out in your mind.
Yeah. I mean, most of these places I brought food with me because I had it in my refrigerator. Because this was really last minute and I already had food.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would give it a 7. It's good. It's not like my favorite.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay.
Auvers-sur-Oise.
This one was my favorite, and I was not entirely expecting it. But the draw of this village is this is the town where Vincent van Gogh lived the last few months of his life and painted a lot of his paintings. I think reports varied, but between 60 and 70 paintings he painted here in just a couple of months.
Right.
Something that really added to the enjoyment of visiting Auvers is a podcast called Finding Van Gogh. It's put out by a German museum.
Yeah.
And so the podcast is a series that's very professionally produced, telling the story of this interaction between Van Gogh and this doctor. And the whole reason that Van Gogh was at this town is there's this doctor here, and there is a painting that Van Gogh made of this doctor in the Orsay Museum, which I had been to recently. So the order here is first go to the Orsay Museum and see the Van Gogh paintings that he painted in this town, and then go to the town and see the place where he painted them.
Yeah.
The cool thing is you can actually recognize when you see, this church at Auvers that is a famous painting that's in the Orsay Museum, and you walk up to it and you immediately recognize it from the painting. But of course, Van Gogh's paintings are very stylized, and so it's very different, but still recognizable.
Yeah, he had such an imagination. Such
Yes.
a wonderful imagination. When I look at a photo of that church, it would have never occurred to me to paint what he did. Like, he was just
Yes.
a genius, a brilliant man.
Yes. Yeah, so Auvers was my favorite. I want to go back because not everything was open, because I was going in late March on a Tuesday. And that's probably something else I should say, is that a lot of these things are closed on Tuesdays. So if you're planning to do a day trip, look out for things being closed on either Mondays or Tuesdays.
Yes. And also find a good podcast that talks about it. That always helps, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes. All in favor of good podcasts.
Yes. So you told me about this podcast, Finding Van Gogh, and I listened to it too, and I thought it was very interesting. I mean, they make it sound like it's all a big mystery. I'm not sure it's that big of a mystery, but it was really informative and very interesting to listen to.
Yes. And I listened to that on the train going there, and then while I was walking around. So it's a good combo.
I wanted to ask if the town has a lot. Is it all Van Gogh stuff, or is there other stuff?
There is a chateau, and it's not just Van Gogh. It's really, they have this sort of light show where they explain the history of the Impressionists in the area. So it includes Van Gogh, but it's a lot of the others. And that I think is worth doing. It wasn't like my favorite part of the visit, because I pretty much already knew everything that they were telling about. But still was a nice show, and, in an interesting building. So it's worth doing as part of the visit. But really, for me, the highlight was comparing these things that Van Gogh painted to the actual real thing.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me want to go find other places that Van Gogh painted.
Yeah.
I know that he was in the south of France for a while, and I'm sure that there's something similar down there.
Saint-Rémy de Provence has a lot of that.
Yeah.
And Arles as well, and places like that. Yep. Okay, so this one is for art lovers, obviously. This is one.
Yes, and specifically Van Gogh.
How about Fontainebleau?
Fontainebleau, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it does feel more touristy, I think, because it has this seal, UNESCO seal. It has this very fancy chateau that has been used by French kings going back a very long time. The building is considered architecturally important because it was sort of the initial importation of the Italian Renaissance into France. So the very beginning of the French Renaissance.
Yeah.
And the Renaissance style is very, very fancy, which is it's not usually what I would choose if I'm decorating and you walk into these places. And it's just absolutely every inch of the walls is painted in this very elaborate, flowers or, decoration. It's just sort of overwhelming. It's beautiful, and I'm glad that I went, but it wasn't like my favorite of the week.
Okay. But you spent the whole day there.
For all of these, I kind of left between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and came home about 5 p.m.
Yeah, so it's a whole day. Was there one that was more difficult to get to once you got off of the train?
Oh, that's a good question. I remember one, and let's see. I think there was, and now I don't remember which one it was. I think probably the one that involved the most walking was Auvers.
Okay. But it's just a walk.
That would be pretty easy to look up.
Yes.
If you look at a map, you can see where the trains go. I am an avid walker, so it doesn't bother me to walk for an hour to get from the train station to where I'm going.
Yeah.
None of these were quite an hour, but if there's somebody out there that has limited mobility, you definitely want to put some effort into figuring out what your options are sort of to go the last mile. Most of these places have a bus, so you'll take the train and then you're supposed to get on a bus. But for some of them, I decided I would rather walk than take the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though it was still covered by my pass.
Sure. All right. So I interrupted you rudely. You were in the middle of telling us about Fontainebleau.
Yeah, it's something that I'm glad that I saw it. And it's interesting to compare the architecture of Fontainebleau to the architecture of Rambouillet. That it was just much more elaborate and detailed. And the chateau at Rambouillet is much more sort of simple, and it has kind of a massive feel. It feels heavy and more plain. And it's interesting that sort of modern style is really more like the medieval style than this Renaissance style.
That's true. Yeah. We like to keep it simpler in modern architecture.
Yes. Let's see. The next one, Thursday.
You went to the Domaine National de Saint-Cloud.
Yes. Or if you are an Anglophone, Saint Cloud.
Yes. But it's not a cloud.
It's not a cloud. So this is one where I was starting to get tired, and I didn't want to do a really elaborate day trip that was involved being on the train for an hour or two. And so this is very close to Paris. And I thought it would just be kind of a, throwaway, that it would be less interesting. But it turned out to be one of my favorites. The idea here is that there used to be a chateau here next to Paris. It was destroyed during the Franco-Prussian War. And reports vary about whether it was destroyed by the Prussians or whether it was sort of friendly fire from France itself, because the Prussians had camped out there. But whatever the reason, the chateau was basically burned / dynamited at that point. And for a long time, the site fell into disrepair, and there were just the walls, the stone walls with the ceiling kind of blown out. And then in the 1950s, they decided to renovate this. They removed what was left of the ruins and renovated the fountains. And so there's this famous landscape guy called Lenôtre.
Yep.
And so he designed these fountains. They're very elaborate fountains. And the cool thing is they have this virtual reality machine next to where the chateau used to be, that it looks like one of those machines where it's a binoculars, where you would go to the fixed binoculars and look out over the view. But what you're actually looking at is a screen, and there's some sort of sensor that knows which direction you're turning. So you can look into this fake binoculars, and, whenever you're facing Paris, you can see the Eiffel Tower and Montparnasse Tower, which are kind of the two landmarks that you can see from out there. And then whenever you turn around to where the Chateau used to be, you can see the Chateau as it would look if it were still there today.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun.
So it is fun, and it's a little disorienting to kind of be in this machine, this virtual reality machine. And it gives you a little video where you kind of zoom down and see what it would have looked like on the inside of the Chateau, which was very similar to Fontainebleau, where it was the Renaissance style. There's actually apparently a movement for people around here to rebuild the Chateau, which I think would be really interesting if they basically put it back to the way it was, because it was, it was around long enough that they have photos. There's also an official app that basically shows you pictures of what the Chateau would look like from different points, standing around to where it was. The other nice thing about visiting Saint-Cloud is you get a fantastic view of the city. So there's this place where you can climb up these stairs. There's a nice little park at the top of the stairs, and you get this gorgeous view of Paris.
That's interesting. So you go there, the Chateau is not there anymore, but you see it in virtual reality.
Yes, and the fountains.
But you go for the fountains.
Yes.
Because the garden somehow was spared from all of this destruction?
Yeah, I think the destruction was they bombed out, or they put dynamite in the Chateau and blew it up.
Huh. So does it feel like countryside? Does it feel like you're away from the city, or are you so close that it still feels kind of like city?
Well, I mean, it's pretty rural in terms of there are lots of trees, and it would be easy to get lost wandering off into the woods. And I saw some red squirrels, which I don't see in the city.
Mm-hmm. They're pretty.
Yeah, I had never seen them before. I'm used to gray squirrels, and I'm used to squirrels not being afraid of people. But apparently the red ones are a little more skittish, and they don't like to be where there's lots of people.
Yeah.
It does feel like if you wanted to, you could go out in the woods.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And there are people jogging and that kind of thing. So it's not totally deserted, but that's worth a trip. And especially since you can get there on the metro lines. You don't actually have to even get on the RER.
Right. Right. It's very easy to get to.
So that would be, a very easy thing for people to see just for a couple hours, even if they didn't want to make it a full day trip.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So this virtual reality machine, is there just one or are there several?
I just saw one.
Huh.
But I was the only person there.
Right. So it's not like there's a lot of buildings or there's no facilities, there's no restaurants. There is just a...
There is a museum, and there is one building I don't know if it's part of the Chateau or a building that was from the same era. But it was closed the day that I went.
Okay.
So at some point, I'll probably go back and go to the museum. I think you have to pay to go to the museum, but you don't, of course, have to pay to walk around the outside.
Well, it's strange that it was closed because you were there on a Thursday. You'd think that it'd be open on a Thursday. So it probably has really limited opening hours.
It's because it was still March.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
So starting the first week of April usually is where things seem to be opening up.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was a common theme around a lot of these places, is that things were not fully open or just starting to reopen, which makes sense because it was kind of very unusual, I think, that it was this warm in March.
See, this is one where I've never been, or I don't think I've ever even seen pictures of it. So I look forward to your photos. There's probably not much there on the photos, but it'll be interesting to see anyway.
There's more than you would think. There's the fountains, and I have some pictures from the app. that show what the castle would have looked like if it were still there.
Fun. That's great. Okay, then you
Yes.
went to Saint-Germain-en-Laye.
Yeah, this was one that was recommended in the Facebook group because I've been posting my pictures every day to show people what I'm doing. They have a traditional street market that I visited. It's on Fridays. It's not every day of the week. I think there's one other day. And it's, it was a nice street market, but not really too much different than the ones that I've been to here in Paris.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to buy a lot of food because I'd have to carry it around with me for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of fun to see, traditional French markets.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you go online, there are pictures of this market from 100 years ago, and they've been holding it in the same place.
Wow. That's fun.
Saint-Germain, it feels a lot like Paris, except cleaner. Where they are, there's a guy with this giant vacuum cleaner vacuuming the sidewalk, which I suppose is how they keep it so clean. The main thing that I was there to see was this National Archaeology Museum, and it is in a chateau, which is, very impressive from the outside. Inside, of course, it's all museum. But this is, archaeological finds, mostly from within France, but some, other places in Europe. And it was, a very impressive museum at the level of the kind of museums you see in Paris, even though it's outside of Paris, where, they had, going back to this, cave paintings. They had some cave paintings that had been removed from the caves, apparently, and brought into this museum. And then you go forward to like the Iron Age and the Bronze Age, and they have artifacts in terms of like jewelry or tools, lots and lots of tools that were used at this time. They had a piece of fabric, like somebody had made fabric, linen fabric. They say linen is durable, but this was linen that was like thousands of years old that really impressed me.
Wow. They
had some gold jewelry that had been found in a grave. They had, armor from the Bronze Age or the Iron Age,
right?
And that kind of thing.
Probably stuff that they took from all over France, because this is a national archaeology museum.
Yes.
So they took the best pieces from all over the country and
exactly
took them to Paris, because that's what we've been doing for a long time.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Probably all this stuff is from the Dordogne, and you can't see it in the Dordogne. You got to go to Paris. Oh, well. Yeah.
I've seen some of it because I was in that area. And if they do have caves there that you can go into and see these things like in the caves.
Right.
So
reproductions.
But yeah, I think it was worth the trip to just go to the museum itself.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Very good. So I'm kind of curious about the next one, Provins. Or maybe they say Provins.
This is my second UNESCO World Heritage Site. And so I was sort of primed for it to be sort of prim and proper, because that's, this impressive seal of approval. And it turned out that it had kind of a carnival feel. So what this is a medieval town that was important as a trading post in the Middle Ages, that people would come from all over in Europe to trade their goods at this town in France. This was the furthest distance from Paris. It was 2 hours on the train each way. They have something called the Pass Provins, which costs 15 euros, and it gets you into the 5 paid monuments. In addition to the paid ones, they have things like the medieval wall that you can, of course, see because it's right there.
Yeah. It's a wall.
And they have several, medieval churches there that you can go into without paying. But the 5 paid monuments were, first there's the Caesar Tower, or Tour César, which is a big tower that was built during the 100 Years' War because they wanted to have like a lookout to see if there were invaders coming. And apparently it didn't work very well because England occupied the town. But the tower is still there, and it's, impressive and you can walk up inside of it,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's, kind of narrow, rickety stairs. You can go all the way up to the bell tower at the top
Cool.
and actually climb around up in the bell tower.
Wow. That's going to be nice. Did you like that?
It is. Yeah, yeah. The second one was the Museum of Provins, and this was very small. Really, the best thing about it is it's in one of these old medieval half-timbered houses. And of course, the whole town, this was a town that feels nothing like Paris. It really does look like you would imagine a medieval town to look like, where most of the houses have these exposed beams on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
In one of your tours, you take us to these two houses in Paris that are the oldest houses in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole town that looks like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the Marais tour that
Yes.
there are a couple of houses side by side left in Paris that are pretty old. I'm not sure they're the oldest, but one of the oldest, two of the oldest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Contenders for the oldest.
Exactly.
So the museum was inside of one of those old houses. It was interesting to go inside and look at the architecture from the inside. In terms of like the stuff they had, there was not a huge amount. The third one was the undergrounds, or souterrain.
Souterrain.
Apparently, this is something like the catacombs, where they had originally dug it out to mine stuff. In one section, they were mining limestone. In another section, they were lining clay, which they used to degrease sheep's wool.
Mm-hmm.
This area apparently was known for making fine wool goods.
Mm.
So then later on, they would store wine and such underneath in these tunnels. There, as far as I know, are no bodies under there the way there are with the catacombs. But
as far as you
they
know,
said that, I think the lady said there were 10 kilometers of these tunnels under Provins. And there was an English-speaking guide. I went in the morning, and they said, if you come back at 2:30, you can get an English tour. And the lady kind of apologized at the beginning that her English was rusty because this is the first time they've been open in 2 years.
Wow.
So I managed to go on their first day of being open.
Wow.
The fourth one is what they call in English the Tithe Barn. In French, it's the Grange aux Dîmes.
Yeah.
And it's unusual because it's a medieval stone building that's not a church. And apparently that's not something that was very common, but it's set up. It was the location where the vendors that came from all over Europe would rent space there, and they would sleep there, but also sell and make their goods. So they have like all these little booths set up where there's like a wax dummy almost dressed as a Flemish merchant, showing you what the thing would do. And they have basically a little wand that you swipe on the display, and it speaks to you in English, telling you about it. So at that place, they gave me the audio guide, even though I didn't have any ID with me. But if people are going to go do this, bring some ID, because they want you to leave your ID in exchange for the audio guide.
Yeah, they're annoying.
Yeah. And then the last one was this priory, Saint-Eyoul. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that, but
Saint-Eyoul,
this is one where they did not give me the audio guide because I didn't have ID. And so I just kind of walked around. It looked like a place where monks in the Middle Ages would have lived. Okay. And they had some signs in French and English talking about like the restoration of the place. At that point, I was kind of tired anyway and getting ready to go home. A tip, if you're going to go to this place, is that like a lot of places in more rural France, they do have public bathrooms, toilets, but they expect you to bring your own toilet paper.
Oh, okay.
And totally forgotten about that. I remembered that from my first visit to France years ago, but I did end up like getting a sandwich at a cafe specifically so that I could use their toilet,
Yeah,
which is, how you do it. That was okay. The other tip was when I bought the pass, it cost 15 euros, but they don't take credit cards or bank cards. So I happen to have cash, but if you're going to Provence, bring some cash.
Okay.
And the fun thing about Provence, I think, was that they really had a fun atmosphere where they were having fun with their medieval village. There are people dressed up in medieval garb, not just the people that worked there, but also a lot of the tourists. Which, it's just not what I was expecting, that I would be, touring this tower and there's a guy there and he looks like he stepped off the set of a TV show.
Oh, that's fun. It's not like that every day, is it?
I think that they do it every Saturday.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I think they might have been more excited because this was the first time back in 2 years.
Right.
But yeah, they had, guys walking around playing bagpipes, which I didn't know bagpipes were like a medieval French thing.
We didn't have the big bagpipe that you see today, but they had much smaller bagpipes. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a guy playing bagpipes. There's another guy who had this flock of geese that were trained to honk on command.
Fun.
And he would give the audience members little bits of food. And then the geese would honk all suddenly all together on command and go out and get the food from the people. So it's a very fun environment. I think a lot of people go for the weekend.
Yeah.
Because if you say they actually have entertainment in the evening, they had an eagle show that I didn't see because it was, like at 5 p.m. and it would have taken me a long time to get back because it was a 2-hour train ride back home. So I didn't stay for that, but I can imagine somebody making a good weekend out of this little town.
And I bet there were lots of people with kids too, no?
Oh, yes. Little kids dressed as knights or princesses with plastic swords, lots of that.
Yeah, well, that's fun. If you're visiting Paris with kids, maybe on a Saturday you could go do that.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine that.
Yeah, bring their plastic swords or get some there. I'm sure you can buy some there. The princess outfit or whatever. And have fun. Yeah, sounds like wonderful, memorable stuff to do with kids.
Yes.
All right. And last one is Versailles, but you just went to the park. You didn't go to into the chateau, which is great because the park has a lot to it. So tell us about that.
Yes. So I visited Paris in 2007 as a tourist, and I went to Versailles and saw, the Fountain Day, musical fountains and all that kind of thing up close to the chateau. And I was able to sort of, when you're standing at the back of the chateau, you can look way down this big alley and you can see a pond that's like shaped like a cross. That is the park of Versailles.
Yeah.
And it's separate, like you go into a separate entrance. So you go, to the side of the chateau and enter on the side.
Right. So that's the entrance by the orangerie, right?
No. Let's see. Let me look at a map.
If you're facing the front, the main entrance of the chateau, you hook to the left.
Yes.
And enter that way.
Yeah, but I had to go back pretty far.
Oh, okay.
Let me go look at the map, and I think I can find for you the gate that I went into. Des Matelots.
Okay.
Matelots.
Okay.
Is where I went in, and they do have a gate with somebody like guarding it. So they're not going to let just anybody in, but they don't charge you. They want to make sure that you're not like carrying a weapon, I guess.
Yeah.
So I went in there with my bike, and really my goal was to do the experiment of traveling with my bike on the train, which you're allowed to do on weekends.
Uh-huh.
and to see how that goes. And you cannot bring your bike up to the gardens by the chateau with the fountains, but you can have your bike in the park. And this was a Sunday afternoon, and lots of other people had the idea to bring their bikes to the park. So this was a very crowded day at the park.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice. I rode all the way around that big cross. There's a paved path for pedestrians and bikes, which is nice. And there's some like side paths that are a little less crowded that you can go off into the woods. But it's on a paved path, so you know you're not going to get lost.
Yeah.
And yeah, carrying the bike on the way there was not too much of a problem. On the way back, it was really difficult because it was extremely crowded on the RER. And I had a hard time getting off because I was wedged into the back, standing room only. But I eventually did manage to get off with my bike.
You clubbed everybody with your purse and got out.
Yeah. You have to do the aggressive paddle.
You have to be assertive.
Yes.
Yes.
But I think if I were to do it again, I would probably try to either plan to go when it's not crowded, like Sunday afternoon. Or if you do one of the trains where you have to book a seat, you can buy a ticket for your bike, and so you'll be guaranteed a spot for your bike. And it's only an extra €5 for a ticket for your bike.
Okay, but that's not an RER. That's a regional train.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I brought my bike here with the idea that I would be doing, like I could carry my bike on the train, take it off the train, and then go explore from there.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would go on the RER again when it's just a free-for-all in terms of anybody can get on no matter how crowded it is, and they just push more people on.
Yeah. And well, you have a nice folding bike, but still,
Yes, I do.
It's it's bulky.
Yeah, it doesn't take up that much space, but if you are standing for the entire trip, and yeah, it was just the trip back was unpleasant. Yeah, so I don't think I would do that again. But the park itself was really nice, and I enjoyed riding around. And because it's paved, it's an easy path, and you can rent bikes there. So if you don't have your own bike and you're just in the mood for a nice bike ride, that could be a fun thing to do.
So is the bike rental near the Allée des Matelots?
No, I think it's up closer. That's a good question. I just saw it on the webpage. I didn't see it in person, so I'm not sure where it was.
Okay, but I mean, there is on the website, the Versailles website, they show you where all this stuff is. So it's
Okay.
Yeah, and you can also rent bikes in Versailles, in the city of Versailles.
Yes.
And I bet this was full of French people with their kids and stuff, right? Riding around Versailles.
Yes. Yeah. Most of these places I went, actually, I saw more French people, or at least people speaking French, than people speaking English.
Right.
With the exception of Fontainebleau, which, because I think it's this famous World Heritage site, a lot of tourists go to, and it's easy to get to as well.
Yeah. All right. So if you only had time for one thing, you would go, it sounds like Auvers, because it's artsy and you like that. And your second choice would be?
Oh goodness, that's hard. I think my second choice would be Saint-Cloud.
Wow.
I want to go when the fountains are open because they were not turned on yet.
Is that because you saw some squirrels? Because you like animals?
I do like animals, but I mean, I liked the history. So I think for me, the key to enjoying these places that I enjoyed the most is with Auvers, I had that podcast telling me the history as I was traveling there. With Saint-Cloud, I had this app. And I was, on the train reading about the history of the place that I was going to.
Okay.
So I think I was more primed to be interested in it because I'm interested in the story of a place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. When I saw your list, I thought
Yeah.
Provins would be a favorite of yours as well, but maybe not.
I liked Provence, but it is kind of geared more towards kids.
Okay.
It's one of those things where I'm glad that I went, but I don't think I will ever go back.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful that you got to do all of these things and all in a row too, because it's really good to kind of weigh them, and give them give them a rating, I guess.
Yeah, and it was interesting to sort of compare the architecture of the different chateaux because Rambouillet had a chateau, Fontainebleau had a chateau, Saint-Cloud had a deceased chateau, Saint-Germain had a chateau with a museum in it. So that's a bunch of different buildings, castles.
Yeah.
That you can see that they're similar in some ways and different in others.
Yeah. So you don't, to see chateaux around Paris, you don't have to go to the Loire chateaux. You can stay much closer and see them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not as lavish as Chenonceau or Amboise or whatever, but some of them might. No, not quite. but they are lovely anyway. And there's plenty to do around Paris without spending a fortune or a lot of time. When you have friends visiting, which one will you take them to?
I think that would depend on the person and what they were interested in. Like, I'm really interested in Van Gogh, so I've really enjoyed Auvers. But if somebody is visiting me and they're not interested in Van Gogh, I'm not going to take them there because it would be probably boring for them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's planning to visit me, and she really wants to go to Lyon. So we have planned a day trip to Lyon, which is a totally different thing where you have to buy a ticket. But
yeah,
there's a museum there that she just really wants to see that has miniatures.
You can do that on a day trip as well because of the TGV that's so fast.
Exactly.
Right.
So you can go, it's the same time as going to Provins, but a much larger distance because you're going so fast.
Right. And you could do that to go to Dijon or to, I suppose you could go to Avignon, but that would be, you could because it's 2.5 hours on the TGV. So I suppose you could.
I think Bordeaux is about the same.
Yeah, Bordeaux is 2 hours on the TGV. Strasbourg is probably an hour and a half or something on the TGV.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the TGV, you can get a lot of places and back to Paris in a day. But
yes,
that's kind of a shame to do it that fast. But why not? If your friend has this idea that she wants to see that one museum, it can be done. And if you buy tickets a long time in advance, if she knows her dates, if you buy your TGV tickets in advance, you're not going to pay very much for them. So
exactly. So that's our plan.
Yeah, it's very cost effective. Yep. Exactly. Okay. Wow. Lots of wonderful stuff. Any last words of wisdom about these day trips from you, or have we covered it?
I suppose my last words of wisdom would be that I really enjoyed stretching myself because I'm kind of a planner in terms of personality. And so my challenge to find a new place every single day meant I didn't really have time to plan.
Yes. Yes. You had to kind of jump.
And so I discovered some things that I probably would not have discovered if I'd had more time to plan. Like, I think if I had had a little more time, I would never have gone to Saint-Cloud because online it doesn't really look like there's anything there.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the visit because I learned about the history, was able to use their little virtual reality machine, which I don't think anywhere on the website it doesn't say that that's there, but it really added to my enjoyment. So you can't plan for everything is my take-home message.
Yeah. Sometimes just go and try it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Go and try it.
Yeah. And it sounds like most of these places you brought some lunch with you anyway. So, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Like just bring some toilet paper.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much,
welcome.
Jennifer. That's wonderful. Merci beaucoup, Jennifer.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing that, and you can see them at patreon.com/join us. Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been doing it for a long time, and I love you. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Yves Collard and Elizabeth Brawley. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. This week, I started a conversation with my patrons about dogs in France, and they had a lot to say. So next week, I'll set up my Facebook portal, I'll turn on the video, and I will react to their comments on video. I think it'll be fun. I want to try this. See if patrons enjoy it. I think I will. My thanks also to Mike Scaff, Jeannie Heidenreich, and Eileen Sotomora for sending in a one-time donation by using the green button on any page on joinusinfrance.com that says tip your guide. And I have to say, Eileen, that you did an itinerary with me a year ago. You bought the 4 tours that I had out at the time, and now you made a lovely donation. I sometimes, podcasters, I'm sitting here facing the wall, talking into a microphone, and sometimes we get worried about what's happening, and I worry that there's a constant churn of people coming into the Join Us in France community and leaving once they've had their vacation. And I'm sure that happens some of the time, but there's definitely also a lot of people who stick around because they enjoy hearing about France, even if they're not getting ready for a trip right now. And that sort of realization puts gas in my tank, So thank you so much for your donation and kind words. It feels great. And a shout out also to Diane, who wrote a wonderful review of my Paris tours on the Facebook page. Every time someone does this, so writes a nice saying, I was just in Paris and I used Annie's tours and it was, it was great, or whatever they say. It's usually positive, or they wouldn't be posting stuff like that. I guess, I don't know, maybe they could say they stink, but that's never happened before. So, every time somebody does this, someone pipes up and says, what tours? I don't know about the tours. And how do you get the tours? That sort of question. So I really appreciate those of you who are sharing about the tours, because it helps everyone have a better experience in Paris. So thank you so much, Diane. Cheevers Wagner, I think is how you say your name. Very kind words, and thank you for sharing your experiences with the tour. Another way to support this podcast is to hire me to be your itinerary consultant. You know how it works by now. You purchase the service on joinusinfrance.com/boutique. Then you tell me about your dream trip to France. I write a detailed write-up, and then we talk about it for an hour on the phone. This week I did my very first one in French, all in French, with Nan, because even though Nan lives in California and is American, her French is really good, and she means it when she says she wants to practice her French. So it was very pleasant to do that. But if you want to book this, do it ahead of time. So I'm recording this on April 22nd, and I'm booked up until pretty much June 22nd. So I'm at 8 weeks ahead. I've had to refund a couple of people this week because they were going to travel way too fast and I just couldn't fit them in. Do take that into consideration. There's just one of me, and there's only so much I can do. An interesting travel tidbit on the Facebook group this week. Someone asked me, can you ask for a doggy bag in France? And the answer is yes, you can ask for a doggy bag in 2022, but it's kind of a complicated question. Of course, we know that food waste is bad, and French people are aware of that as much as anybody else. But styrofoam boxes are worse, I think, and most restaurants don't buy them. I'm not even sure if you can buy the standard American styrofoam anymore in France. Probably not, because they really are doing away with styrofoam everything. So they might wrap your leftovers in aluminum. Perhaps they have cardboard pizza kind of boxes. But most restaurants don't have any of that sort of thing. So that's one thing to consider, is that it's not part of the normal routine of restaurants in France. And typically French restaurants do not give you so much that you can't finish what they give you. Giving the right amount solves two problems: the food waste problem and the styrofoam problem. So I think that most French restaurants, that's what they're trying to do. But if you need a doggy bag, you can ask for one. This week in French news, well, by the time you listen to this episode, we should all know who won the French presidential election for 2022. Emmanuel Macron is still ahead in the polls, but that doesn't mean much. This is a rematch of the previous election for us. Last time, Macron won by a ridiculous margin. It was 63% to 37%, okay? I think this time it's going to be much closer. If he gets 55%, he'll be doing great, because things have changed a lot in France, and the pandemic has really soured people on his sort of, you're going to have to stay at home first, and then you're going to have masks, and you're going to have to get vaccinated, and you're going to have a health pass, whatever. Lots of people really didn't take kindly to that. So, if he gets 55%, I'm going to be very happy for him. So I'm on pins and needles as I record this, but hopefully he'll get in again. For my quick personal update this week, my husband and I are going to a concert on Sunday. This hasn't happened since 2019. So we're going to see Zaz. She's a French singer. She's that sort of jazzy kind of singer. She's great. And so it'll be very fun. She's playing La Halle au Grand in Toulouse, which is a concert hall that it's about 2,000 people. It's not very large, and the tickets we have are right up front. So it's going to be wonderful. So I look forward to that. But it's going to be fun because her concert is supposed to start at 8 p.m. on Sunday, which is when they always announce the results of the election. So I don't know what she's going to do. She's probably, everybody's going to be looking at their phone, right? There's no way that people are not going to be looking at their phone at that point. So I'm assuming that she's probably going to not come on until 10 minutes after or something to give us a chance. But I'll let you know if she says anything at all about the election. It'll be interesting. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/386. And that's where you can see a recap of what we talked about and see all the links that Jennifer shared. And also you'll get a link to the transcript, which is great. Use the search button on the site, because we've talked about all of these places. We have a lot of episodes by now. And so really, search is your best friend. If you enjoy the show, introduce a friend to the podcast and tell them that they can listen on any audio app that they have already on their phone. Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Pandora. We're everywhere. I try to make it easy for people to listen if they want to, and it's free, so why not? I get messages every week from people saying how the show has helped them have a better time in France. I just got one just a few minutes ago from somebody who just had his honeymoon in France, and he said they had a wonderful time and that he's a new Francophile. And, it makes me so happy. And I think the podcast, and it's not just me, obviously, because in this case, it's Jennifer telling you, helpful stuff. So the podcast really helps people. So don't be shy. Share an episode that you think will help your friends, and I think they'll be grateful. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise where she and I take a deep dive into the Cathars, les Cathars. If you visited the southwest of France, you might have heard the word, well, even if you haven't visited the southwest of France, the Cathars were kind of a big deal in the Middle Ages, of course. There's a big section of Occitanie, so Occitania, where we live. It's like between Béziers and Toulouse and Foix and Perpignan. That big triangle. Well, it's not a triangle. It's like a parallelépipède. I don't know how to say that in English. It was full of Cathars, okay? And in the Middle Ages. And it's a fascinating story. And they had some really strange beliefs. And you'll learn all about them next week on the podcast. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France travel podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2022 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.